All right, we're live now.
7:01, admitting all.
Oh, look at all those friendly faces. Well, I think they're all friendly. Oh, thank you all for joining. This has been a big week. Seems like every night we've had something. Last night we had the U.S. Senate Democratic race on. That was a very exciting, very fast-paced group. And then Tuesday night we had our fiscal and economics group. And tonight we've got Ed Spire. And I don't have to say anything more. Ed, you got some comments that you'd like to make? Kick off the meeting?
Well, let me say that I did a meeting earlier this month on something. I think it was on the Supreme Court. And I wasn't really planning on doing another one until next year. I thought maybe I could have a holiday here. And but when I look at what's going on in this world, I just can't ignore it. I just can't. I have to speak about what our administration is doing, and I have to do it now because we just can't let this stuff go unnoticed. We can't not be pressuring our legislators. So here I am again, and now I've been told by the folks around me that next month we got to talk about Citizens United decision. We've talked about that in the past, so that means it'll be something I can bring back, and it won't be tons of work. So I wanted to do tons of work over the holidays to get ready for that one, but I will want to update it. So next month we're going to have something about Citizens United. Because this month, my second one this month is going to be on what the GOP is doing with our military. But first, I think we should have a word from our sponsor. So, Bill, why don't you talk a little bit about the NWSOFA?
Right, that's my favorite subject. So we're just going to check real quick if you can see the slide. Start.
It's there.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is sponsored by NWSOFA. It is not NWSOFA. It is Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action. We're commonly referred to as the chapter in the land beyond O'Hare. We are an indivisible chapter, as you can see. We are one of 2,700. Tonight's program, the U.S. military under Republican control by Ed Spire. And just as you see all those little dots out there, that's at 2,800 now chapters. They're growing every day. Several new chapters come in. And it's kind of exciting to be part of this huge program. We did get some acknowledgement today from Ezra and Leah, the co-founders, that there's going to be a No Kings 3, 4, and 5 coming this next year. So why do we exist as a group, as an organization? We hope that we can help get information to our members so they can understand the facts, they can sharpen their arguments or their discussions with other people, and they can communicate to their immediate audience or their organizations. It's what we do. We are organized on the twin snowflake principle. On the left side, on the orange, you can see all the communications that we do, from newsletters to our Facebook, to YouTube, Twitter, through the website, all different ways. We try to inundate you with information about upcoming events. Probably too much so, but we think we owe it to you to get this information out. On the right-hand side is how much we have grown. We started 13 years ago with 17 of us. We had been doing some calls for Obama's second term. And during that second term, those 17 of us got to be friends. after Obama won the election, we said, let's go out and have something to eat and see what we would like to do. So we learned everybody's last name, which was important, even though we had been meeting for 6 months every Tuesday and Thursdays. And we said we'd like to be a progressive group of doing something. So our first goal was to start to find a name for ourselves. But while we were doing that, Michelle Obama had sent out a note that they were changing the Obama for America, OFA, to Organizing for Action, and we're starting activist groups. So we signed up to be one, and we were accepted. So that was shortly after Sandy Hook. So the very first progressive issue that we had was gun violence prevention. And you can go right around the turquoise right-hand snowflake there, and you see that we moved into healthcare, immigration, social justice, women's issues, and fiscal, economics. We've added recently our elected outreach, both for federal, state, and local. We have a climate change group, which will have a Zoom meeting next Tuesday. We have 2 ROD groups, one that does the voting rights, the elections, the gerrymandering, the vote by mail, all things to do with voting. And then we have a second group that started with confronting disinformation a couple of years ago and now has grown like tonight with the issue of the day. On the inside, you can see all the new issue groups that have started this year since January, and there's 9 of them. And as you go around it, you can see Sorting Soup, Vision Forward, our rally protest, candidate interviews, legislative updates, how-to hands-on tech to make people more efficient, Discord, Truth Brigade, which is now called No Kings, No Lies, social storming. That's it. And then we have our sharing our stories. So 19 different groups and issues that we do almost monthly, which is really cool. But the secret sauce of our organization is we have 30 all volunteers that make the communications and the issue teams work. We literally couldn't do it without this group of people. So in the last couple of months, we've started with what we call our link tree, which is kind of an interface that allows people to scan a code. This link tree it pops up, and it allows you to quickly go to our websites, to our Substack, to our Blue Sky, to our sign-up forms, to our YouTube. About 15 different things that you can instantly get to. It's really helped us a lot. I mentioned the Substack. We do a Substack now. We post every day on Substack, and you can just see the articles and the number of people who have, or the number of views. Usually it's 120, 150, somewhere in that area. And then, as we said earlier, we are live streaming this program, and it will be on the NWSOFA, Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action, NWSOFA.org website under the tab YouTube channel. And these are just some that we had there, but you can go up there at any time and be able to see this video be ready. It's got about a 35-second delay from the actual. So tonight,
So Bill,
yes.
Bill, tell me what sorting soup is. I never figured that out. What is that all about?
Well, okay. Sorting Soup grew out of our coffee and conversation, which we have every morning at 9, Monday through Friday at 9 o'clock in the morning, where people just come into a conversation and talk about what's happening in their lives, what they've seen, what they're concerned about. And we realized that we had so many people, about 70 to 110 people that join every morning, that we never really get to action steps. So Sorting Soup is a weekly at 5 o'clock where they sit down and they go through some of the poignant things that were brought up by the folks. And so that is Sorting Soup. Now, in the last couple of weeks, Sorting Soup has become a mini book club as they've been examining the Project 2025, a new book called The Survival Guide. And they've been reading those chapter at a time. I think they're up to the 5th chapter. And then they they read 2 or 3 pages and then they discuss it. Very cool. And then they're doing since they've done this for about 5 weeks now on Sundays, they also at 9 a.m. in the morning have a sorting soup book club, and they're back about 2 chapters. So helping people get caught up. So that's sorting soup. All right. So today's presentation, we're not going to call on you if you raise your hands. We're going to have the chat open for you to put questions in it. As long as you start out the chat, your question with question, all in caps, we will capture that and we will send all those questions to Ed, and he usually tries to get through most of them. So that's today's world. And Ed will be talking about the U.S. military under Republican control. Our presenter, Ed Spire, the co-lead of our Restore Our Democracy group. Ed, it is up to you. Go ahead, please.
All right, let me get my slides up on the screen. Okay, as I mentioned, I just look at what's happening with what the current administration do with our military. I think we have to talk about it because it just doesn't look good to me. Let's talk about what we see going on in the Caribbean and what we see in the bigger picture. Because frankly, what you're seeing in the Caribbean is kind of the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole lot more we need to talk about in the new national security strategy. And it all really boils down to what kind of world does this administration want to see? And what kind of world do we want? And if we don't agree with what the administration is doing with our military, how can we act? Because we always end these presentations with a call to action. And you'll note that I'm talking about the Republican Party here. I'm not just talking about Trump. Yeah, Trump is doing this. But the Republican Party, hey, they nominated him for the presidency, and the Republican leadership in Congress, who could step in and provide some real oversight, some real direction, they're just letting him do whatever he wants to do. So for me, I don't even say that the buck stops with the Trump. For me, the buck stops with the national leadership of the Republican Party, in my humble opinion. So that's why the, I couch this presentation is not about just what Trump is doing. It's about what the Republican Party is doing through him and letting him do. So, the most visible changes we see are what's going on in the Caribbean, controlling the sea lanes. Our military is sinking these fast drug boats. Now, somebody initially was talking about fishing boats. No, these aren't fishing boats. These are boats that are specifically built to move drugs. They are very high powered. They're very fast. They're faster than our surface ships can keep up with. And what the Republicans are doing now is just killing them. They're just shooting missiles from drones and killing them. And this is patently illegal. There is no congressional authority for them to do this. And there's no due process in these killings. I mean, the federal government only has 2 ways that it can just kill somebody. One is that there's a declaration of war or some other congressional authority for the use of our military, or that we have some kind of due process. And neither of those things exist now. They talk about authorization. They say they're ordering these boat strikes under the president's inherent powers as commander in chief. But there's no authorization of military force from Congress. And they say that these are limited operations that supposedly do not rise to the level of war. That's what they say. They've described the people on the boats as narco terrorists, asserting that they are a military target on some list of targets. I can't believe that there's a list they have that names those specific people on those boats. I mean, that's nonsense. They say the operations are lawful self-defense and they comply with the law of armed conflict by occurring in the national waters. I mean, that's the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel has supposedly issued an opinion defending the legality, but that opinion is classified. Nobody has seen that opinion. Some Democrats have demanded seeing it. It's seeing it being disclassified, but they haven't. So they say it's legal. They say they have a reason to believe it's legal, but they won't show it to us. Um, they also, when we start using military forces, the current law from Congress says that within 60 days of starting to use military forces, the administration has to come back to Congress and explain what they're doing and ask for approval. Um, well, they haven't done that within 60 days, and they argue that it doesn't really apply because, oh, since they're from unmanned platforms and they don't place U.S. forces in harm's way, uh, that the statute doesn't apply in their opinion. But Congress has not passed an authorization for the use of military forces that specifically authorizes forces against Venezuela or so-called narco terrorists in the Caribbean, or the specific organizations Trump has named. Both House and Senate members, there have been members in both chambers that have tried to induce war powers resolution to block this. But the leadership is not taking those movements forward. Uh, so far, we haven't been able to force a change in policy. Key committees have open investigations. We'll talk about where those investigations are going. But so far, Congress has not really acted strongly to call the administration forward to ask what they're doing and why they think they can get away with it. Under the UN Charter, under international law, this stuff is only possible with Security Council authorization. We certainly don't have UN Security Council authorization or self-defense against an armed attack. Come on, these fast drug boats are not an armed attack. Legal experts across the spectrum say there's really no clear armed attack from these boats that would justify lethal force, especially that double tap that we will talk about. The human rights, international law scholars have described these operations as unlawful killing, potential war crimes. They lack a valid self-defense justification. They violate both international humanitarian law and human rights laws. Remember, I send all these slides out every time, so you'll have all these slides. You can read them more in depth at your leisure. What does the administration say? The president has claimed that the scale of U.S. overdose deaths gives him authority to strike drug boats. We have legal authority. We're allowed to do that, is what he has said. But he has not pointed to any specific statute or any authorization of military force, and has not released the opinion from their legal team as to what makes them think they can do this. So in practice, his authorization is therefore just a mix of Article 2, Commander-in-Chief claims, oh, I'm the president, I can do whatever I want, terrorism, drug trafficking designations, that is rhetorically as if they were a war authorization. Think about the claim that these guys are terrorists. I mean, terrorists are people who use force to intimidate a population. These guys aren't using force to intimidate a population. They're just supplying the drugs that some people want to buy. Uh, if there was no demand from drugs in our country, these guys wouldn't be able to sell drugs to us. There's no way that you can claim these guys are terrorists. Um, and so there's some secret memo that they won't show us that justifies this. So the bottom line, in short, there just is no specific legal authorization from Congress for what Trump is doing in the Caribbean. They turn on a very aggressive reading of unilateral president war powers that many constitutional and international law is unlawful, or at least highly questionable. Not only that, but the administration claims that this is preventing fentanyl from coming to the U.S., which is nonsense. Fentanyl doesn't come from Venezuela, it comes from Mexico. And in fact, when they started having congressional hearings about that September 2 attack, the the military um, uh, told Congress that this stuff wasn't coming to America. It was bound for Suriname. They were bound to hook up to a ship which was going to Suriname by way of Cuba. And we'll come back to Cuba because there's an important point here. These drugs were headed to Europe or Africa, not the U.S. The stuff they're doing here is not going to change the amount of drugs that are available in the U.S. for people who want to buy drugs to be able to buy them. It's just not. And then there's this whole issue of a second strike. Every time they they shoot down one of these fast drug boats, they're filming this stuff from their drones, and they always publish it. They always say, "Here we got another drug boat. Here we just saved another 50,000 American lives," which is nonsense. Um, but on that first strike on September 2nd, after the first strike, there were two survivors clinging to wreckage. And our laws, we have a federally passed law called the Law of the Sea, and that law explicitly says you have to rescue people. If there's a survivor of an attack and they're not a threat to you anymore, an immediate threat to you anymore, you have to rescue them, not kill them. And in fact, that Law of the Sea has says in specifically, you can't just kill people that are survivors of an attack. You got to rescue them. And the example they give is a naval attack where there are people in the water who are going to drown if you don't pick them up. And it says you have to pick these up. You can't shoot them. Uh, it's just right there in U.S. law. And the U.S. law of the sea is incorporated into the UCMJ, the United States Code of Military Justice. There's just no question whatsoever that killing the survivors of a first strike is just immoral and illegal. Now, some members of Congress have seen that video. And, the ones on the Democratic side have said, oh, it's one of the worst things I've ever seen. What the ones on the Republican side it says, good thing we got these guys. Oh, thank you. And Hegseth personally denies ordering that strike, but he supports the decision of the admiral who did it. And he will not air the second strike video publicly. He airs the first strike videos all the time. But this one, the second strike video, he will not air. So this is another thing where maybe we need Congress to step in. So he said the point is this. It's true that these fast drug boats are a challenge for us. They are so fast that our surface ships can't overtake and stop them. But past administrations have handled this with due process. And the way they do it is they catch up with the boat with a helicopter because the boat can't outrun a helicopter. And then they use a machine gun on the helicopter to shoot out the engine so that the boat has to stop. The fast drug boats is dead in the water. And then our surface ships overtake the thing. They arrest the crew. They confiscate the cargo. They bring the crew to trial in the U.S. That is how you do this with due process without just killing people. That's the way we've done it before. But now, under the Republican administration, we just murder them. That's just the same as if we found somebody on the streets of Chicago selling drugs and the cops could just shoot him dead. No, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. It's illegal. But that's what the Republicans, not just Trump, all the Republicans back of Trump that are all supporting him, that's what they're doing. There have been some other recent naval actions in the Caribbean. We seized a large oil tanker carrying Venezuelan crude. That shipment was bound for Asia. I got a typo there, Asia through Cuba. And now Pam Bondi, other officials say the ship was sanctioned, was accused of moving Venezuelan crude through an illicit network tied to Iran and other designated terrorist groups. So, there very well could be some reasonable legal structure for having taken this ship because it was involved in breaking sanctions, in smuggling oil. So this is not a wartime attack like on a drug boat. U.S. officials present as part of a broader effort to cut off Venezuela's oil revenue. And that's, part of the boat strikes are also to affect Venezuela. And that one could be legal. The skipper, which is the name of the boat, the skipper usually means a captain. No, the name of that boat was the skipper. It had been on a sanction list for years. It had been involved in moving sanctioned Venezuelan, Iranian oil to fund terrorist organizations. And we consider Iran to be a terrorist organization. And the Department of Justice did obtain a federal warrant that allowed it to take over this ship, which makes the operation generally lawful. As a matter of U.S. domestic law, once the ship is treated as a property subject to U.S. jurisdiction. So we're not saying that this taking of this tanker was illegal, but it certainly was extravagant under international law. Um, the UN Convention states that you cannot enforce domestic laws on a foreign flag vessel. But the problem with this foreign flag vessel is that it really wasn't well flagged. I mean, it really is registered in one country but flagged in another, and it's using a transponder that fakes where it is. So the ship really was involved in smuggling oil, basically. Um, Now, several law and sea experts argue that sanctioned oil and alleged links to terror don't, on their own, fit those exceptions. So, a seizure purely to enforce U.S. sanction has no standing or lack of validity in international law. But under U.S. law, the United States, uh, what they did under U.S. law is probably okay, although under international law, it's not quite so clear. Um, Unless we can really prove that the tanker was stateless, was fraudulently flagged, it probably was fraudulently flagged. So it probably was not totally illegal for them to capture that ship. But um, character experts look at this and they say that it can be lawful if the skipper was stateless, if it was improperly flagged. Um, some critics described the move as extraterritorial use of force to enforce unilateral sanctions. Uh, some people call it an act of piracy. But one of the things that's important is to think about how this fits into a larger picture. Why Venezuela? Why are we focusing on Venezuela? Well, frankly, the Trump administration is pursuing regime change there. They won't say that out loud, and they'll talk about oil. They'll talk about migration politics. They'll talk about drugs. But the real issues here are essentially great power competition. So if you don't believe they're really going after regime change, think about classified presidential findings authorizing covert CIA operations instead of Venezuela. Um, U.S. officials privately saying the ultimate objective is to remove Maduro. The administration is developing day after plans. What happens if Maduro is ousted? Um, U.S. is recognizing an opposition figure as the rightful president. And there's some truth to this. I mean, the election of Maduro was probably fraudulent, and the opposition figure probably did have the popular support. And in fact, the opposition figure was given the Nobel Peace Prize for her work to try and undo the stolen election. So yeah, Maduro maybe is kind of a crook, but still, uh, is that an excuse for regime change policy? The point, however, is that it's pretty clear that the Republican administration here is trying to make a change in that government, as we have so many times in the past in Latin America. And it's not just because of drugs. The oil is more important than drugs. The attack on Swift boats put some pressure on Venezuela, but seizing an oil tanker, now that is much more of pressure because that's where they get their revenue. They don't get a lot of government revenue from the gangs that are selling drugs, but the government gets lots of revenue from selling oil. So oil provides almost 90% of Venezuela's export earnings. Seizing tankers, fighting sanctions, threatening an oil blockade really hits them where it hurts. Um, and after the seizure of that tanker, other tankers with millions of barrels of Venezuelan oil are stuck and they're avoiding Venezuelan waters. Buyers are demanding much deeper discounts. Export volumes are dropping, all of which is squeezing Maduro's financing. So the drug boats aside, what he's doing with oil tankers is hurting Venezuela a whole lot more than just killing those drug couriers. And even so, um, just if you take Venezuela out of this black market and smuggled oil, there's still plenty of black market smuggled oil out there. And what we're doing, if we say we're doing this to hurt Iran and to stop smuggling of oil, well, that's nonsense. We're doing this to hurt Venezuela. It'll hurt Venezuela terribly, but it won't. It's not a major stop to the oil smuggling that's going on. And his latest statements, what did he say the other day in a social media posting? He said Venezuela must return to the United States of America all the oil, land, and other assets they stole. What is he talking about? Well, he's kind of mashing together. Been a few real disputes over oil projects where we invested in oil projects down there and then they nationalized it. And we invested some assets down that they took over. But he seems to be pursuing some totally baseless claim that Venezuela stole resources that he says belong to us. Well, that's nonsense. Venezuelan oil doesn't belong to us. Venezuelan oil belongs to Venezuela. Even under every international law, even if they mistreated foreign investors, that doesn't mean that their oil reserves are now our property, can be returned to Washington. That's nonsense. At most, you can legally claim some monetary damages, some specific commercial assets like shares in Citgo, which was the partner down there. But this idea that they they owe us their oil and their land, that's just crazy. It's just crazy. But it does fit into his current strategy. Because if you look at what's going on here, if you look at the recent national security strategy, you will find that he's trying to reinvigorate and expand the Monroe Doctrine. Now, the Monroe Doctrine was an early decision that we were going to make sure that foreign nations didn't have undue influence in the Western Hemisphere, that we, the United States, would be the major power in the Western Hemisphere, and we would keep Russia and China and Europe from having major influence in our hemisphere. But now he seems to say, here's the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. And he says explicitly that we are going to use U.S. military power to gain access to energy and mineral resources in the Western Hemisphere. What? When he demands that Venezuela return the oil, land, and other assets it's supposedly stole, that's just political rhetoric. It's designed to justify military pressure campaigns and to frame Maduro's government as foreign terrorist organizations that's living off stolen oil fields. And that, that's not serious or defensible legal claim, not at all. Now, we mentioned Cuba, so let me tell you how Cuba fits into all of this. The drug boats going across the Atlantic towards Africa or Asia or Europe, they're transiting through Cuba. The oil tankers, the one we just confiscated, they go to Cuba first as well. And in fact, all this is done as a way that Venezuela is supporting Cuba. Venezuela gets some cheap oil. Actually, that should have said Cuba gets some cheap oil. Cuba gets some cheap oil from Venezuela. Cuba uses some of that domestically, and Cuba resells most of that overseas for a profit. So Venezuela is helping Cuba here, and when we interdict Venezuelan oil, that hurts both Venezuela and Cuba. And there's no surprise that the Republican administration is doing this because our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has always been very much against the Cuban regime. He comes from Florida. He comes from the area where the Cuban exiles are all. And a lot of his political power has come from being really tough on Cuba. So the fact that they're targeting Venezuela and the connection to Cuba makes a lot of sense in what their motivation is. And this all relates to this new 2025 national security strategy, where it explicitly reorients U.S. power away from propping up the world order, as they say, towards defending our homeland with the Western Hemisphere, border security as core missions, and the deployments in the Caribbean, the Operation Southern Spear, are held up in that doctrine as examples of projecting force regionally using naval, air power near Venezuela to control cartels, migration, what they call narco terrorists, and these are threats they feel are directly harming Americans. And this all amounts to normalizing warlike force against non-state actors. These cartels, these drug runners, those aren't state actors. The vote strikes are a move to treat drug cartels as enemies. The U.S. that the U.S. is in some kind of armed conflict with these private organizations. These aren't governmental organizations. We're not at war with Venezuela here. They're claiming we're at war with drug cartels, and that's kind of blurring the line between law enforcement and war because interdicting drugs ought to be a law enforcement activity, not a military warlike activity. But they want to expand where lethal force is considered legitimate. It's an emerging pattern. The White House invokes national self-defense to justify attacks on cartels and smugglers at sea, maybe even on land. Maybe they'll start bombing cartel establishments on land in Venezuela, using the military for missions that are mostly been done by the DEA or the Coast Guard. When we're talking about using helicopters to shoot out drug boats and overtake them, that's the Coast Guard that does that. That's not our international military. So this whole thing amounts to building up a projection of power and regime change in our Western Hemisphere. Carrier strike groups, Marines, build up around Venezuela, they're all instruments of coercive diplomacy. They're aimed at regime change, or at least serious leverage over Maduro. That they don't declare it to be an invasion force, but it's getting awfully close to that. The people who look closely at this and understand what's going on, they say this just reflects a broader reorientation of U.S. might towards our near region, towards the Western Hemisphere, the southern part of the Western Hemisphere. Oil tank seizures, boat strikes, military posturing, control of sea lanes, control of energy flows like oil, political outcomes in the Caribbean, and we're doing all of that instead of thinking about the large-scale occupations in the Middle East, which are still ongoing, things in Ukraine that are still ongoing, things in Asia that are still ongoing. This Trump colorate to move to the Monroe Doctrine is really explicit in the new 2025 national security strategy. And that's where it's really formally articulated. And you got to read this stuff carefully to see this stuff. The PDF of the NSS says Western Hemisphere, the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, it states that the U.S. will assert and enforce a corollary to the Monroe Doctrine to restore American preeminence in our hemisphere, protect our access to key geographies throughout the region. What does that mean? That directs the U.S. government to identify strategic points and resources in the Western Hemisphere for protection and joint development, tying his Monroe Doctrine to concrete control over strategic locations and resources. You read that carefully, and what it means is that they all treat the Trump corollary as not just one-off hand slogan. It emphasizes that it reorients U.S. forces posture and attention towards the Western Hemisphere. That the corollary explicitly envisions using our military to gain access to energy and mineral resources in our region, which is kind of what Putin is doing in his region, which is a way of saying that we're going to control where energy and mineral resources come from in the Western Hemisphere. What about the rest of the world? Well, the new NSS signals that our investment abroad is going to be narrower, more conditional. We expect the Europe and our allies in Asia to to carry the burden much more than we have in the past. And they have to align closely with our economic and political priorities if they're going to remain allies with us. Europe and NATO, we're going to deprioritize Europe compared to our Western Hemisphere. We're going to deprioritize Europe compared to the Indo-Pacific. Um, and we question whether Europe can remain a vital ally. I say we, the Republicans question, can Europe remain a vital ally? The Republicans are criticizing the EU, demanding higher defense and spending policies and more civilization self-reinforcement. This latest NSS, the National Security Strategy, warns that we could weaken the confidence in U.S. security guarantees, especially on NATO on the eastern flank. We're pushing European states to accelerate their own defense buildup, strategic autonomy, raising doubts about our long-term commitment to backing them against Russia. And in Asia, it's the same situation. Our allies in the Indo-Pacific area are told to increase their investments to help control China, but many are uneasy because we document a downplay of China as a named strategic competitor. We're shifting our top priorities to the Western Hemisphere. We'll have less focus on their region. Partners in the UN, in the global South, our emphasis on great power competition, economic security, skepticism, multilateral institutions. All that shows that we have a more transactional approach, which is, that's the kind of thing Trump does. It's the kind of thing the GOP is now supporting. Cooperation and support are available, but only when they align with our trade, migration, and security agendas. Look, the bottom line here is the GOP would have us abandon our traditional allies, our world leadership. Critics across the spectrum argue that, in practice, this strategy does amount to stepping back from our core post-World War II allies, passively accepting greater Chinese dominance in their regions, even if the document doesn't just say that outright. That's what it boils down to. The new NSS revives Monroe Doctrine focus on the Western Hemisphere, treats Europe in strikingly derisive terms. The NSS questions the NSS in writing questions whether Europe is a vital ally, and they portray the EU as weak and in decline. We're emphasizing burden shifting rather than U.S. guarantees. We're framing alliances as conditional, transactional deals, and we're just hollowing out the core bargaining that underpins NATO and all of what we've done since 1945 in building security partnerships. It creates space for both Russia and China. The European policy, say the postures here, signaled a retreat from Europe, which could encourage the Kremlin to push even harder in Ukraine or elsewhere. And betting that American backing for NATO will be weaker, less predictable. In Asia, the new NSS strategy formally reiterates support for a free and open Indo-Pacific, but it also recasts China primarily as an economic counterpart, shifts top geographic priority to the Americas, leading some experts to argue that Beijing, Moscow are effectively being acknowledged as dominant powers in their neighborhoods, while the U.S. is going to concentrate on our own neighborhood. And the Kremlin agrees with that. The Kremlin has said that the new NSS largely consistent with the Kremlin's vision. And Europe sees that. The Swedish prime minister says, that's it. The U.S. and Russia are in agreement about what's going to happen here, and there's nothing to add about it. What a situation. In fact, the NSS, the 2025 National Security Strategy, is actually hostile towards our European allies. The NSS says economic stagnation, censorship of free speech, suppression of political opposition, cratering birth rates, and above all, migration raised the stark prospect of the erasure of European civilization. Really, that's what the Republicans think is going to happen in Europe. And the new national security strategy worries that soon some European countries will become majority non-European. Oh my goodness, which can only mean, oh, they won't be white. And I guess that the Republican Party thinks that that's the end of Europe if Europe isn't all white. Is that what they think? Um, the GOP administration is continually hostile towards Europe, growing influence of patriotic European parties, what they call patriotic European parties. They're happy to see that, and that they're going to do what they can to help these patriotic European parties correct the current European trajectory. In other words, the US is actually set on pursuing regime change in Europe, and it'll be throwing its weight behind the likes of Germany's Alternative for Deutschland or France's National Ally and in Reform UK. Really, now we're going to go and help the right wing of Europe take over and dismantle European democracy? Really? This stuff is not in our long-term interests. These changes, oh, they might serve short-term political themes, maybe help the next election. But these are risky things for our interests over the long term. They undermine our alliances. They undermine international rules. They undermine the predictability that have historically made the US and the world safer and more influential. And we've been the leader to help make that happen, and they're taking it apart. It harms our long-term interests, hollowing out alliances, hollowing out, destroying the rule-based order. It trades durable influence for a narrower, more transactional posture that could leave the U.S. more isolated, facing stronger Russia, stronger China-led blocs later on, demanding far more from allies while signaling ambivalence about defending them. That just erodes deterrence. It invites regional adventurism by rivals. It invites guys like Putin to try harder in other areas. It reduces allied willingness to support the U.S. policies in future crises. So there's some arguments that it could help. Some supporters say the strategy corrects past overreach. It forces prioritization, better aligns U.S. commitments with resources. But even some of those who value and rebalancing caution that this vision substitutes one form of overextension, that is, civilization primacy and aggressive economic correction, for another, without a stable equilibrium. And this may not actually deliver any kind of long-term security or prosperity for our country. What are they building? They're building a world where a few strong nations rule their parts of the world by force. Putin can rule his part of the world by force like he's doing in Ukraine right now. China can take over countries over there by force. And will be a strong nation in our hemisphere. And these three strong nations are each led by a strong men who could do business with one another. And that's the kind of thing Trump wants to do. And that's the kind of thing the GOP is letting him build. You might say this is just Trump's way, but the leadership of his party is in power, and they're just letting him do it. And what kind of world do we want? We want a world ruled by law and agreement, not force. We want a world where like-minded nations work together towards law and agreement. We want strong alliances to act as a bulwark against those who believe that might makes right. And we want the U.S. to continue leading that effort as it has since World War II. I think that's what we want. So what can we do about it? Well, if we see this shift, this national security strategy shift as dangerous, we can act on multiple fronts. We can act in elections. We can push Congress. We can form public opinion. We can direct support to alternative institutions. I mean, none of that stuff by itself can do much, but all together, they can make a difference. We can shape who holds power. We have to focus on elections that actually control the strategy. The presidential, the Senate, the House. We need to make sure that we support challengers who reject this permanent emergency powers and people who favor alliance-based security. And if you work as an election judge or election organizer, you have to continue to strengthen our trust in elections because there are those that want to undermine our elections. We have to make sure that we run elections in a way that directly constrain authoritarian use of national security policy, We want to force real accountability at the ballot box. We have to put pressure on Congress. We have to build visible dissent. We need to coordinate constituent pressure. We need to make sure that we're doing calls, in-person visits, town halls, letters together, and not just one-off, but find groups where you can work together with others to make sure we're pounding on these people with this. We have to push for hearings. We have to push for sunset clauses, funding limits, war power style constraints on these overseas operations that they say are homeland defense. We have to make this a salient issue. We need to do local teach-ins, the kind of things I'm doing right here, webinars, op-eds, slide decks that tie boat strikes, tanker seizures, and allegiance abandonment to concrete local harms, how it's affecting our economy. It's hurting migrants in our country. It's hurting our veterans, veterans. And we can move public opinion, and that can give members of Congress some cover to actually resist. We need to continue to build pro-democracy, pro-alliance infrastructures. We need to work with support groups that defend democratic norms, voting rights groups, rule of law organizations, foreign policy reform networks. We need to explicitly link domestic authoritarian moves to this new security strategy, so we can argue that this new security strategy is damaging for us. And we need to push structural reforms. We need to make future reversals easier, that make future reverses easier so that we can undo what's being done here. We need stronger war powers enforcement. We need mandatory transparency of covert action. We need guardrails on this unitary executive claims where the administration thinks they can do whatever they want and Congress just stands back and lets them do it. So, just to summarize the last couple of slides, make sure elections work to build trust in our elections. If you're not an election judge and you can be, please step up. If you want to volunteer for Election Protection Network, you want to volunteer with the League of Women Voters, you want to volunteer in any way that you can help make our elections work, please do it. And of course, vote every time you can. We need to pressure Congress to stop the administration of what they're doing. You need to lobby your representatives. We need to organize group efforts towards this lobbying. We can not just lobby our representatives, we can help others in red states lobby theirs. We can help motivate people in red states to lobby their legislators. We can support organizations that reinforce their democracy, support these organizations with your time, even more than your money. Money's good, but time's better. The groups, who to support? Well, there's really three kind of groups to support. The groups that defend our elections, the groups that litigate against authoritarian stuff, and the groups that are pushing for structural reforms. And who are these groups? You want to talk about, did I skip one? Rule of law, anti-authoritarian litigation. Well, protect democracy. Democracy Forward are groups that specialize in suing over the abuse of power, election subversion, weaponizing the executive branch. Those two groups translate broad worry into concrete legal constraints. They helped create the Electoral Count Act reform, and they pushed for limits on independent state legislature theory. Supporting these two groups, Protect Democracy, Democracy Forward, are something you want to think about. Voting rights, pro-democracy organizations. The League of Women Voters is one of the primary ones. Common Cause is a little more active on the front line than the League. There's national voting rights funders like Democracy's Fund, government, Schusterman's Democracy. These are groups you can find that focus on access to ballots, fair maps, nonpartisan election administration. And these are all things we have to do to make sure our elections work well. And of course, Indivisible and No Kings provides the grassroots infrastructure for mass demonstrations. And I just heard Bill say today that we can expect 3 more No Kings demonstrations next year. And everyone needs to be bigger. Everyone needs to have more turnout. Every time you go to this, bring 3 friends who didn't go last time. Because when we can get hundreds of thousands of people out in the streets, it's going to be hard to ignore us. And there are groups working on structural and court reform to Brennan Center, American Constitution Society, People's Parity Project, Fix the Courts, Demand Justice. These are all groups that are working to help the Supreme Court move to reform, help restrain their jurisdiction, help implement ethics rules, to broaden our democracy packages. Their research, their model legislation, their public campaigns, they give members of Congress concrete options for reshaping our courts, restoring guardrails. So there's groups here I've mentioned in 3 different areas. You're going to get these slides. You're going to have these names. You're going to know who these groups are because we need to work together to do this. When we work together, we will win. Please choose at least one of the groups I just mentioned, at least one, and support them with your time and or your money because nobody else is going to do this but us, you and me. So let's do it. Thank you.
And yes, Ed, we do have questions.
I knew we would.
Yes, we do. All right, let me get to them. Give me one moment. All right, Bruce's first question here. What evidence is there that they are drugs on these boats? Do we believe if they say there is intelligence?
Well, I don't question the fact that these fast drug boats are smuggling drugs. I mean, there's you see a small fast boat with 3 motors on the back and a whole bunch of packages in the boat and 2 guys running the thing. This is not a fishing boat. They're moving something and they're moving it at very high speed. No. It's generally accepted that these boats are moving drugs. Um, and that they've been doing this for quite a while now. Um, as I mentioned, we have in the past uh, managed techniques that allow us to interdict these things. We can catch it. We can't catch them with our surface ships. They're way faster than our surface ships. So we catch them with a helicopter. We shoot out the engines. We overtake them. Then when they're dead in the water, we arrest the crew. We confiscate the drugs. They're drug boats, and the people that are in there are not criminal masterminds. They're people who the drug cartel is holding their family and saying, "You will run these boats for us, or we'll kill your family." These are not drug kingpins. These are uh, uh, unfortunate souls that have been pushed into doing this. And the old way is to overtake them and arrest them and to confiscate the drugs. Yeah, we know they're drug boats. There's no question about that. But the point is, you can't just murder them. That's just wrong.
Okay, Magda has a question. Why can't we interdict the boats closer to home by the Coast Guard?
Well, first of all, they're not coming here. They're going to Cuba. They're going to hook up with a larger ship in the Atlantic, and that ship is taking the drugs to Cuba, and then they're transmitting overseas over the Atlantic to Europe and Asia. Now, when boats like this come to our coast, we do interdict them. The Coast Guard does handle them the way I described. But these drug boats out in the Atlantic Ocean moving drugs from Venezuela to Cuba, they aren't where the Coast Guard is. They are the Coast Guard's by our shores. These boats aren't by our shores. They're not coming to our shores. So the whole idea that murdering the people in these boats and sinking them is stopping drugs from coming to the United States is total nonsense. It's a lie.
Susan's question, what can I do to help stop this?
Okay, so I went through at the end um, groups that you can support. I mean, certainly you want to be active with your legislators to make you want to call them maybe not every day, but how about 3 times a week? You don't just call them once and that's it. You got to nag them. You got to put pressure on them. You got to call your legislators repeatedly, telling them that the Congress has to step in here and stop this. And then it would be better if Congress heard this from red states and blue states. So find groups like Indivisible that are organizing campaigns oriented towards red states. You know, when we see a congressional race or any race that's important in a red state, you'll find that Indivisible is working up campaigns directed to the red state where we call them or we write postcards to them or write letters to them to encourage people in those states to put pressures on their legislators. So watch for those kind of campaigns. And then look through the groups I listed. You'll get a copy of the slides. Look through those slides, look through the groups I listed, and find one or two that you want to support with your time or with your money. Those are the things that we need to be doing to push Congress to actually care about what's happening.
Okay, Bruce is inquiring, what do you believe is the real reason for the striking of these boats and the blockade? Regime change in Venezuela?
Yes, it's absolutely oriented towards regime change in Venezuela. And as the national security strategy says, they want to use our military to ensure we have access to energy and mineral resources in our hemisphere. So their action here is to try and make sure that Venezuelan crude oil doesn't go across the Atlantic, smuggled across the Atlantic to Iran, but that it's sold to us at a discount, for example. I mean, they have said clearly that they want to use our military to make sure that we control our neighborhood, very much like Putin wants to use his military to control his neighborhood. That is what the Republicans, I will not say it's just Trump, that is what the Republicans are doing with our military.
Okay, Larry's inquiry, is it really enough to say that they are not attacking a group of people when these drugs are destroying the lives of Americans?
But the drugs, okay, first of all, nobody is forcing anybody to take drugs. Nobody is cramming drugs down somebody's throat or injecting them in their arm. These drugs are being taken by our own people. There is demand in our country for these drugs. You want to solve the drug problem in the U.S. You can never do it through interdiction. And this interdiction isn't even interdicting drugs coming to the U.S. You want to solve the drug problem in the U.S., you have to address why there's demand. Why is there demand? There's demand because we don't have enough funding for mental health. There's demand because we have too many people who have lost hope in America because the economy doesn't support them. There's all kinds of reasons that people want to take drugs. You want to solve this problem, you address those reasons. You can't solve this with interdiction of drugs. You have to stop people wanting to take them. And once there's little demand for drugs in the US, then drugs will stop coming to the US because there'll be no money made for it. These guys aren't terrorists. They're not pushing drugs here to destroy our country. They're just businessmen. They're just supplying the demand that we have in this country. And we should be addressing that demand not through interdiction, but through social services, through economic actions, through making sure that offshoring or automation or green technology or AI, or all these changes in our workforce, all these changes are leaving people behind. And those people that are left behind sometimes fall into despair and decide they're going to take drugs because they don't have any other way of making themselves feel better. We have to take care of those people somehow so they don't feel the need to take drugs. And heck, when we've talked about this in prior sessions. When Clinton supported offshoring, he said we will have to take care. There will be losers, and we have to take care of them. And if we don't, the forces on the right will use those people to destroy our democracy. Well, it's not just the forces on the right. The people that are left behind often turn to alcohol or drugs or something when they have no other future for their families. That's the stuff we got to do to fix the drug problem. And murdering people that are trying to bring drugs here won't do it. And in fact, what they're murdering, those people aren't even bringing drugs here. I mean, it's kind of off topic a lot, but that's the truth.
Okay. Chris's inquiry. Okay. So who is going to call this illegal and do something about it? Trump is going to claim ignorance, but who pays for this?
The only people that can call it illegal and do something about it is Congress. Well, the courts can too, but only if the trouble with the courts is that who has standing to file a court case? Really, Congress is the only people that have standing to file a court case in the first place. So the key to fixing this lies directly in Congress. Now, right now, there are some congressmen who would like to work on this, but they're afraid of Trump's political power. If we can build more um, political support for doing something about this, especially in red states, then Congress will have the gumption, will have the political cover to do something. And if that doesn't happen, at least about a year from now, we can throw a lot of those bums out and elect some people who actually will do something about this. But it really comes down to Congress. I mean, to some extent, um, if Trump's polling gets worse and worse and worse, that in and of itself might cause him to change. Because if his polling gets worse and worse and worse, the political forces around him will say, we're going to get slaughtered next November if you don't change. So, that could help. But it's really all political. It's really all about control of the House and the Senate. And political pressure over that issue might make a difference. Actually, making a difference in the electoral results in 2026 will make a difference. But there's not much else that we can do besides that. But that's where we need to put our pressure.
Okay. Bruce is inquiring. On what basis can Hegseth claim the videos of the second strike of the two men is classified, whereas they released the other video of strikes of boats?
None. There's no basis for that. But once again, nobody can do anything about it except Congress.
Okay. Larry says, how do the drug boats benefit Venezuela?
Well, I mean, the cartels running the drug boats are a major source of revenue within the country. And some of that revenue ends up in the hands of the Venezuelan government through bribes, um, through taxes. So the drug boats are not the major thing that benefits Venezuela. And attacking the drug boats is really more of a political thing for Trump than it is big pressure on Venezuela. It's small pressure on Venezuela. The oil tankers are the big pressure on Venezuela.
Okay, Ellen's inquiry. Why do you and our courts, including ICC and ICJ, call these kinds of actions, as well as what we are doing in Gaza and the Ukraine, possible war crimes? Aren't we a terrorist state? How can we rationalize labeling Iran and other states terrorist states, but not sanctioning or prosecuting our state crimes against democracies around the world?
Well, first of all, um, I agree that what we're doing in the Caribbean is unconscionable and undercuts our claims uh, as to stating that we expect others to uphold what we believe in when we're doing what we're doing in the Caribbean. But I don't see that so much in Gaza or in Ukraine. I mean, in Gaza, you might make the argument that we're enabling the Israelis to do this, but we're not doing it. The Israelis are. And in Ukraine, we're not even enabling anything bad. In Ukraine, we're helping defend against bad things that the Russians are doing. So there's a spectrum here. On one end, in Ukraine, I don't see that what we're doing undercuts our claims one bit. In fact, what we're doing in Ukraine supports our claims that we're looking for a world run by the rule of law, upholding human rights and international laws. In Gaza, we're a little more on the gray area there since we're clearly supporting what Israel is doing. And I got to tell you, I am not happy about what Israel is doing. And I understand a lot of people are not. But here in the Caribbean, we're clearly violating international law, and we're clearly acting immorally. So yeah, the actions here in the Caribbean do definitely undercut our our claims that that we uphold human rights, we uphold international laws, and that we are working for a safer, better world in those respects.
Okay, Larry's inquiry. Why isn't there a legitimate government effort to stop illegal oil transactions that violate sanctions?
Well, the the problem is that the only way to do that is through military force. And what Trump is doing in Venezuela is a little step in that direction. But I mean, you really have to be interdicting uh, oil tankers across the globe to stop this. Um, and I'm not so sure that's really a good use of our military force. Now, I have to say that that's a little bit off topic. I don't think I've really thought that through thoroughly. Um, so what I like to do is I like to take this one offline, and I will research that a little more and bring forth some commentary on that that will go out with the slides. Let me take a note on this. Um, um, uh, what should the U.S. be doing about oil smuggling, which is basically what it is? I will come back with some 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 well thought out answers to that question when I send out the slides.
Okay, and Larry's other question is, what is the alternative to this Monroe Doctrine corollary that would address the influence of drug cartels?
Well, I don't think that, as I mentioned, I think the influence of drug cartels comes only because there's demand in this country for drugs. I don't think that any amount of interdiction is ever going to change that. If there's demand in this country for drugs, somebody's going to find a way to supply that demand and make a buck. So the whole Monroe Doctrine and the Trump corollary to it uh, isn't really about drugs. It's about the U.S. controlling its neighborhood through force. And the what they're doing has no impact on drug availability in the U.S. because the drugs they're interdicting are not coming to the U.S. They're going to Europe and Africa. Um, and as I've said before, the right way to deal with the drug problem is not interdiction. If we would do what's necessary in our country so that we didn't have tons of people who want to buy drugs, then the cartels would not have the influence that they have. So bombing the cartels or trying to interdict them or then punishing the governments where they live, it's just not a productive way to handle this problem.
Okay, give me one moment. Okay, Garrick is asking, if Trump and the Fascist Party get our nation into a war with Venezuela, and our nation is still engaged in a war theater before the upcoming midterms, how will that affect our ability to have a free and fair election?
Okay, first of all, I will remind you all of what Yogi Berra said. He said, predictions are hard, especially about the future. So I don't make a lot of predictions, but one prediction I will make is that when states run elections and the federal government has no legal role in how we run elections, the administration has no role. Congress Congress can pass laws regulating how we run elections, but the administration has no role in how we run elections. I am confident that at least in blue states, our elections will be run. There's a possibility there might be some intimidation by ICE forces or something like that. But there wasn't any in New York in their primary, and there was a lot of planning on what to do to avoid that. The election officials are very aware of this stuff, and they're teaming up with community organizations that can help us make sure our elections are free and fair. So I have no concerns. I have very little concerns. I won't say no. I'll say very little concerns about the fairness of our upcoming elections. Be it the primaries, we're going to have a primary here in March in Illinois, and a general election in November. I think that you'll see a massive turnout, and if things don't change, I think you're going to see the red side get slaughtered. And I think that's going to be the major way we're going to start to make some changes here. And I think that if he starts a war in Venezuela, it's just going to make the blue wave even bigger.
This is true. Nora is asking, and she has got the same concerns basically. It says, my main issue is having fair elections. I donate to Democracy Docket, Democracy Forward, and the ACLU. We must win the midterms, but Trump has his secret police in blue cities. So how can we stop them from showing up at the polls?
So, first of all, one of the things that we have seen people do is remember, the most important weapon we have right now about ICE is the whistle. All we have to do is show up and warn people. Um, if you have some ICE somewhere on the polls and a whole bunch of citizens come around there and kind of engage with them, there'll be ways that communities can get people into the polls without coming past ICE. That was one of the major things that the people in New York were setting up. They had all kinds of volunteer groups in the right neighborhoods where there might be intimidation, ready to find ways to get people past ICE into the polls. And the other day, I saw the other day a note went out in my neighborhood that ICE was at the Home Depot in Niles, and a word went out on social media, and a whole bunch of citizens showed up in the parking lot at Home Depot in Niles to give them shit, to make it hard for them. They arrested two migrants, and that's all they were able to get because we were there. And I am just so proud of the people. These are local indivisible chapters that are doing this. It's the Skokie Morton Grove and Lincolnwood chapter, and then there's a Niles and Maine Township chapter that are both in that neck of the woods that are on the case, and they're it's like you call out, you say something's going down, get out there, and people get out there. This is the same kind of thing that we can do during the elections. And I'll tell you, the election community is all aware of this. I was at a breakfast meeting Monday of the people who run the early voting sites in the northwest suburbs of Cook County. And we're all well aware of what might happen. We all understand what we can do about it and who we can call. And our elections are going to be fine. They're going to be fine. Don't lose sleep over that, but be ready to help when help is needed.
Okay. Nora's next question is, do we really have any true allies anymore?
Oh, yeah, we do. Sure, we do. The entire Commonwealth, all the Commonwealth nations, all the members of the UK, Australia, Canada, are very strong allies. Most of Western Europe can be counted on as being strong allies. Um, it depends on what we do and what we say. If we're pushing them away, they don't want to get pushed away. They want us to remain uh, a partner with them. And especially in terms of military strength, yeah, they're getting the message they need to build up their militaries, but they can't do that in a year or two. It's going to take 5 years for them to build the military. And if we said we're going to walk away from you in a year, then for 4 years, they're going to be at the mercy of Putin. So they don't want us to do that, and we're not going to do that. We aren't going to do that because because we've got a president that is underwater in popular support. Most of our population wants us to remain strong allies with the people that we have built, that we have led the free world since World War II. The idea that they're going to get away with this national security strategy, that ain't going to happen. Uh, you can't make these changes quickly. And before they can make these changes real, we're going to retake Congress and stop it.
Okay, Diane's question. How did we end up with a Congress of spineless cowards? BBC is not bowing down. Pulitzer is not bowing down. There is a lot of pushback, and I believe Trump is vulnerable.
Okay, first of all, the BBC and Pulitzer are not beholden to US voters. Congress is. The reason that Congress is ineffective is because Trump still has tons of political support. Trump can still point at a legislator and say, you do what I want, or I will make sure that you get primaried in your next reelection and you will be out of office. And as long as Trump can do that to our legislators are going to think twice about going after him. But the political winds are shifting. Just recently, there were 4 GOP House members who signed on to a discharge position that the Democrats were pushing to call for a vote on extending the ACA subsidies. Now, most of the Republicans don't want to see the ACA subsidies extended, and the GOP leadership is not interested in seeing the ACA subsidies extended. But in a competitive race where you're worried about what's going to happen to me, is it going to be Trump bringing forth a primary a candidate opposing me, or is it going to be my voters voting me out of office because I won't support the ACA subsidies extending? Political forces are shifting, and as these political forces shift, you will find more and more Republican congressmen who are willing to stand up to Trump. It's just beginning. I mean, look at a person like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said, "I won't put up with this. I'd rather resign from Congress than support what he's doing." And she says, I'm just the canary in the coal mine. There's a whole bunch more like me that if things don't change are going to be doing this kind of thing. And it only takes 2 or 3 resignations in the House of Representatives for them to lose the majority. At which point Jeffries will be running the House instead of Johnson. So it's not that they're cowards. It's not that they don't want to do what's best for our country. It's that Trump has had the GOP by the you-know-whats for a long time. And he's losing grip there. His grip his hands are feeble now. See the splotches on his hands. So he's losing that grip. And the more he loses that grip, the more you'll find a Congress. And the more we push Congress to stand up against him, they will find that Congress will grow a spine.
Oh gosh, Ed, that was a loaded one, I'm telling you. I'm going to say, you mean to tell me they actually still have them? But anyway, we have one more question that I have found, so let me go to that one. And it's from Sabrina. How do you think things will go for military people, especially the lower level military, following orders that might later be considered illegal?
Well, that's a problem for me. I mean, uh, I'm a military. I'm a basically an NCO, a sergeant in the Marine Corps. I think that when we find Hegseth pushing the military to do things that are illegal, and we find upper members of the military officer corps willing to do it. I mean, there have been members of the military officer corps who have resigned instead of doing what he wants. They've said, I don't think this stuff is legal. I'm not going to carry out this order. I'm not going to refuse to carry out the order. I'm just going to resign. I mean, refusing to carry out an order is a big deal, but resigning instead of doing it is pretty honorable. So when the dust settles and the next administration comes along, I would be very happy to see Hegseth and the top military brass that authorized illegal orders to be prosecuted. But going all the way down the chain, down through subservient officers and down in the enlisted ranks, especially down in the enlisted ranks, I don't want to see that happen. I don't think that's right. I think that we depend upon the professionalism of our officer corps to run our military in a constitutional manner. And if our military is not being run in a constitutional manner, it's the civilians that are pushing them and the top levels of the officer corps that are responsible. And I don't think that junior officers or enlisted men should be prosecuted along these lines.
Okay, I believe that was the last one. I'm sorry if I missed somebody's question, so please forgive me.
Well, if
That
there's
was
anybody else that wants to make a comment or ask a question, we have time. You can raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
Otherwise, I'm going to give you back a half an hour of your time.
Oh,
Jim, what do you got, Jim?
Yeah, just Ed, I understand that every time we shoot a missile at one of those little robots that are carrying drugs, the missiles cost $100,000 to $150,000
yeah.
a piece.
Yeah,
Plus
we're spending
all the support that goes along with it.
Yeah.
So it's like $500,000 per explosion.
Right.
It's costing us a boatload. And now here's the Republicans that are saying we're financially responsible.
Yeah, you're right. We're spending tons of money doing this stuff, and it's all political show.
Yeah.
It's not really changing the drug supply in the U.S., and it's not even hurting Maduro's government a lot. It's really just a political show.
Yeah.
Sabrina, what did you want to ask or say?
let's unmute you.
Sabrina, there you
Okay.
go.
Yep.
There we go.
Hey, first of all, I just want to thank you. This was very informative. I actually work for the Navy, so that's kind of helpful for me to kind of understand because I do have a lot of fears just being in this space, knowing people. And my son is currently training to become a Marine Corps pilot. And I'm very worried about him. And so that was originally what my question was about. So I appreciate that. I hope everybody follows your lead and says like, hey, the lower, the junior officers, the enlisted guys, they don't, I know they're supposed to defend the Constitution and everything, but it is really hard to say no to your commanding officer. Like
Right.
it gets you a huge amount of trouble.
Right. And the commanding officers are supposed to be able to go to the judge advocate general, the military lawyers, to say, really, I just got this order. Is this legal? Can I do this? But he's fired those guys, and they're sending the message that they don't want to see rules of engagement or legal considerations getting in the way of, frankly, killing people. Where his attitude is, this is the Department of War. We're warriors. We kill people for a living, and so the ethos that he's setting up is one of don't even ask if this is legal or not. So to me, it's the upper levels of the military that have to if there's an illegal order here, it's up to them to stand up to it. And if they won't stand up to it now, then they're going to pay for it when we get control back. Thank you, Sabrina.
And they should. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ari, please unmute.
Okay, Ori, go ahead.
I'll try to be quick. I come from a very military family, including my sisters. my sister and my female cousin joining the WACS, the Women Army Corps. But what do you think about the notion of him instituting the draft again? And
Oh,
particularly in communities of color, there have been people saying that they are about to prepare a military draft where you cannot, again, refuse, particularly given what's going on now with these other countries and the drug use. What do you think about that, Ed? Do you think that's going to happen?
well, I don't think it can happen without congressional authorization. I don't
Yeah.
think that the president, I'll have to check on this, but
Please do.
I don't think the president can institute a draft without Congress's authorization. And there's no way Congress is going to do that. It would be extremely unpopular. Um,
Well,
so,
not if he only drafts people of color. I mean, again,
well,
what I've been told, let me just, so when you research it, understand what I've been told, and this is by some civil rights people, that he is orchestrating a draft in particularly areas of blue states where concentration of people of color and lower income people of color. In fact, even one of the churches I know are thinking about trying to provide, I don't know what they're called anymore, shelters or places for people to hide if they come after them. So anyway, look into it because that's the rumor is, coming
I'm
out there.
looking into it right this moment. No, a draft that targets only people of color would be blatantly unconstitutional, could not lawfully be implemented or enforced. Equal Protection Clause, 14th Amendment, so just any explicit race-based classification to strict scrutiny. The government must show compelling interest. Longstanding public policy rooted in the Constitution condemning racial discrimination in this area. The current Military Service Act requires registration based on age and sex, not race. A federal court has held that even a male-only draft violates equal protection. If you're going to put in a draft, it would have to include women. It couldn't just be male.
Well, though they are
And
including women. Yeah, they're including women.
yeah, yeah, but I mean,
Believe
you
me,
can't.
women are included. What I'm saying to you, Ed, and I say this as a lawyer, structurally, Congress is one thing, but the federal judges and SCOTUS right now are the most ultra conservative we've had in the history of this country. So when I say this, I am not saying based on what we have now in print, but what I have been heard, and this is coming from some judge, well, one is a retired judge, but lawyers saying what they're structurally looking at is a way to implement the draft. And they're not going to specify people of color, but they're going to specify, again, lower income, the unemployed. I mean, they're going to structurally try to
Yeah,
look at some ways to do it. And what's constitutional at this time is depending upon what the Supreme Court says it is. And
I agree with that.
that's the
I
problem.
agree. I agree with that. But more importantly, you can't do this stuff by executive order. This would have to come from Congress. So your concern is that Congress would try and pass some law that would do
Yes.
this. I really
And that
doubt.
the Supreme Court would, once it is
Sure,
sued, that the Supreme Court
sure.
would adhere to it.
I
Yes.
understand that. I understand that. But I think personally, I think the chances of Congress instituting any draft of any kind is pretty close to zero. I don't.
Wow.
There's no popular support for this. Thank you for the concern, though, Ari. Let's see what Diane Middleton has to say.
Go ahead, Diane.
Hi, I'm old enough to remember Vietnam, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that was not a declared war.
Yes.
It was undeclared, and yet tens of thousands of people, men, I believe predominantly, were drafted and they died. And so how can we prevent that from happening again?
Amen. Yes, that's exactly right. And my
Hang
husband,
on.
both my ex-husbands served in Vietnam. So
I'm asking a question here. Let me see what it says. Hang on. Do it here. One moment. Yeah. Thank you, Jim. Oh, you know what? There's a difference between a declaration of war or authorization for the use of military force. We haven't seen a declaration of war since World War II, but there have been AUMF authorization for use of military force passed by Congress many times. So the Gulf of Tonkin resolution did authorize use of military force. The actions in Vietnam were actually authorized by Congress, even though it wasn't strictly a declaration of war. Now, what we have going on right now with Venezuela is that Trump seems to be walking us towards war there. He seems, well, since he's saying these people are narco terrorists, he might think that he can use a prior authorization of use of military force in what's called the war on terror. But he hasn't claimed that. He has not claimed that prior AUMF on war on terror covers what he's doing. He has said, I'm just doing this based on the Constitution saying that I'm the commander in chief. And in fact, he's ignoring the congressional requirement to come back to Congress 60 days after initiating the use of military force. It all comes down to what Congress is willing to do. If Congress is willing to pass a resolution that says you haven't complied with congressional law in this area, what you're doing is not legal, we require you to stop, or if they'll pass the actual legislation requiring to stop, those are the checks and balances built into our constitutional government that are supposed to take effect here. The same thing didn't happen in Vietnam. In Vietnam, Congress did support the use of force. The same thing was true in Korea. So they're not quite the same. But if we don't get Congress to act, then we could get slow walked into war with these guys anyway. Diana.
I have another comment. Hello.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Looks like we're out of questions. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for coming. And please, when you get these slides, take a look at some of those groups. Decide that you're gonna not just do nag your legislators. Do watch for opportunities to support red states and nagging their legislators. But look at some of those groups that will invest in our political future, and choose at least one to support with hopefully your time, maybe your money, but your time is more important. So thank you all for being here today.
And Ed,
Bill?
we got a last second question. Would you like it?
Sure, what is it?
Okay, it is from Larry. How do you deal with the ignoring of constitutional norms? I guess we're all trying to figure that one out.
Well, I mean, first of all, let me say norms are different from laws. I mean, norms involve things that we think we ought to be doing, whether it's in the Constitution or not, like the independence of the Department of Justice from political pressure. That is a norm that has been in place, not legally required. It's just something we all agreed we ought to do. We've been doing it since Watergate, and that norm is out the window with this current Republican administration. The Constitution is not norms. Constitution is legal requirements. The Constitution is the basic law of our nation. And when the Constitution says that Congress has the power to decide what we spend and where we spend it, and when Congress has the power to decide where we use our military force and where we don't, ignoring that stuff is not just ignoring norms, it's ignoring laws, hard and fast laws. And only Congress should be able to enforce those things. Jim wants a last word here. What do you want, Jim?
I see that.
Yeah, Ed, I just wanted to make sure everybody had heard the announcement that next month you're going to address Citizens United. A lot of your questions that impact a lot of the questions that came up tonight, in that Trump's ability to target somebody in the primary comes down to money in a lot of cases.
So when I first got started with Northwest SOFA, Northwest. hey, Bill, it's a sectional SOFA, okay? Sorry, when I first got started, with NWSOFA.
It's
I
easier.
was working on gun violence prevention along with Jim, and I still work in that area a lot. But the first thing I did that was outside of gun violence prevention was on the corrupting influence of unlimited political money. And I did a very thorough job on that, and I've revisited it a couple of times, but I haven't revisited this area recently. The last time I looked, it seemed to me that we could solve these problems with a plain old law, that we didn't really need a constitutional amendment. But I will refresh that. I will refresh that discussion and see if anything has changed, see if if the opinion of experts is different now somehow, and we'll review that again next month, probably towards the end of the month. I'm probably going to be taking a lot of personal time at the start. I'm one of the things I am is a church musician, right? And we're really busy this time of year. Christmas is the culmination of the church season for a while, and then we all leave town right after Christmas for a few weeks. So I'll be heading down south on the 27th, and I don't expect to be back at least before the 15th or more. But in the later half of January, we'll do something. I see that Eileen has raised her hand. What's on your mind, Eileen? Ellen?
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. Yeah, I've read that every year the president can sign ever since 2001 something that gives him the right to declare authorization to use military force. Are you familiar with that? They said every single year since the Patriot Act, the president can kind of unilaterally declare this.
Well, okay, so my understanding is that as the commander in chief, the president can direct military forces as he wishes but when he institutes any form of military action, he only gets 60 days to do it on his own. Before 60 days is up, he's got to come to Congress and tell them why he's doing it and ask their permission to continue. And Congress at that point can either say, yes, we authorize what you're doing, or no, you have to stop. Now, 60 days has passed since he started bombing boats in the Caribbean. He did not come to Congress and ask for permission. And he said, I don't need to come to you ask for permission because this isn't a war. Our troops aren't in danger. We're just shooting missiles from planes, from drones, and it doesn't involve anything of your concern, so to speak. And Congress needs to push back on that. And if Congress pushed back on that, the courts would probably support it because it's a pretty clear federal law that you can't just do what you want forever. You can do it for 60 days. And after that, you have to get authorization. That's the understanding that I have of the issue.
Do you think this is relevant to like his idea of the war on terror kind of has given him a huge blanket statement?
Okay. So now I will address that one more time. He calls them narco terrorists. But that's a nonsense statement. And you might think that he says that because he's linking it to prior congressional authorization for a, quote, war on terror, quote. But he didn't claim that. He did not claim that I'm doing this because these are terrorists and I have authorization from Congress for a war on terror. He didn't say that. All he said is, I'm the commander in chief. I can do this. I'm defending the nation. Leave me alone. That's all he said. And there's no way under our Constitution and federal laws that that's a valid argument. So we have discussed that before in this presentation. So thanks for bringing it up again. It doesn't hurt to repeat something.
So,
all right.
Ed, I would like to extend a huge thank you from NWSOFA, Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action, for you doing your second one this month. And I have asked Ed, it looks like he's probably going to go onto a weekly thing next year. So, so that's just a little bit of a nudge, a nudge to get you to it. Ed, I know everybody thoroughly appreciates this. You had great attendance. It lasted right through the very end here, and you put a lot of work into it. And in 2025, I think you probably did 14 or 15 of these. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And it always amazes me, even before any promotion, we have 40 to 50 people that sign up as soon as they see your name as a presenter. So thank you so much. I did see somebody ask a question about when did the Pentagon get four sides. Evidently, my graphic drew it wrong. So sorry about that.
Good one, Bill.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Unless Pete headset changed it, it does have.
We
Pentagon.
can't tell. He might
Eight
change
sides.
it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, I'm not gonna see you guys again until next year. So y'all have a great holiday. Merry
Happy
Christmas,
New Year.
Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, whatever else you celebrate. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it.